My spouse disclosed that she is expecting, and since I am sterile, I am certain that I am not the father. I comply as a result. 2 years ago, my wife, 33F, and I, 38N, tied the knot. After 3 years of dating, she seemed more interested in getting married than I did. But I agreed to it only to please her. We started trying to conceive around a year ago. Once more, my wife insisted on that. We had a great deal of difficulty while we were trying to get pregnant. During the time we were having trouble becoming pregnant, my wife had turned cruel, and things had gotten so awful for me mentally that I made the decision to go get tested. I made an effort to address her behavior, but it was simply intolerable. The doctors informed me that I was sterile a few days following the test. That really did break my heart, to be honest. Though it wasn't my idea to have a child, I had already begun to see my life as a parent, and I genuinely wanted to be one. So the most heartbreaking news I received at the moment was that I would never be able to have children of my own. However, the worst was still to come. I've been attempting to summon the bravery to confess to my wife that I was the reason we were unable to become pregnant. However, I was worried about her response. I couldn't imagine how she would react if she realized that our relationship would probably never lead to what she wanted. She had already been so cruel to me already. I therefore held off on telling my wife the results of my test for a few days. However, it was she who ultimately surprised me. She sat me down and told me she had some very important news to share with me 4 days after I found out I was sterile. I was terribly afraid that she had discovered my infertility in some way. However, she desired to inform me that she had become pregnant at last. She said something that absolutely stunned me, but happily, she was blissfully unaware of my genuine thoughts and started celebrating right away. I made an effort to share in her joy so she wouldn't question me or anything else. However, I had another test the very next day to be sure I was indeed sterile, and the same thing happened to me again. I didn't know what to think since if I wasn't the father, my wife was definitely having an extramarital affair. She had to undergo costly medical procedures in order to conceive artificially. She also couldn't have accomplished anything without first asking me for that kind of money, because I was the only one who was making money between the two of us. She was plainly being unfaithful. My wife arranged a lavish party to announce her pregnancy, so for the following 3 days I did nothing about the strange and horrifying concept. She seemed so delighted, and I felt just as broken, but I had to find the truth about this whole thing, so I couldn't let it show on my face. I kept everything under wraps and didn't even inform my own family about what was going on because it was far too awkward and private to discuss with anyone. It had been much too long, and I needed to know for sure who her child's real father was, so I couldn't even tell my wife what I really believed. For if I did approach her, perhaps she would simply disappear and I would remain in the dark. Fortunately, I learned about it the day of the event. Many individuals came, including my coworkers and our families as well as our friends. One of our neighbors who lived directly across the street from us was also invited by her. The young man who lives next to us, 27M, is undoubtedly much more attractive than I am. Since he's a model, he's undoubtedly more attractive than most people, not just me. He is still, however, attempting to establish himself in the modeling industry. Since his own family lives so far away, he moved in with his aunt, who owns the house he resides in, to be closer to the city. This boy has always had a special place in my wife's heart, and when he first moved in, she would prepare meals for him and his aunt. He's even had a couple dinners at our house, during which we've discussed his work. They had a lot in common and clicked right away when they first met, because he is intelligent, well-read, and majoring in literature, just like my wife. Since he appeared decent enough, I never felt any animosity against him, and I also trusted my wife. However, I sensed that something had changed when, on the day of our celebration, he came inside and my wife's eyes brightened. As soon as he entered, she immediately went to him, and they hugged for a longer period of time than she had hugged any of the other guests. I saw this, even though no one else seemed to. They seemed to be working on something too. All I needed was a means of verifying it. I then made the decision to excuse myself and head to the L, but I went to the bedroom and opened my wife's laptop instead. A few days after she told me she was pregnant, I got the opportunity to examine her phone when she was sleeping, but I hadn't discovered anything unusual. It had become a little more challenging to get to her laptop because she was always using it to watch anything or type something whenever I was home. She would turn the screen away from me whenever I asked what she was doing, explaining that she had been working on her manuscript for months. I also appreciated her solitude because I had mistakenly believed that she was writing a book. Now that things were different, I was quite certain there was no novel and that this was merely a front to keep the contents of her laptop from me. Thank goodness, nothing secure or difficult to access existed. I was able to locate not just her actual email account, but also another one after doing some research. I changed to that one and read through all of the sent and received emails. After reading those emails, I saw that both my wife and our neighbor had made many declarations of love. He was using his real name, so I could recognize the email address. She had informed him that she was expecting in the most recent emails. The mail stopped for a while since he was upset and didn't handle it well, maybe because he wanted to end things. However, my spouse refused to let him leave. After a while, I received the worst email of them all, in which she informed him that she had spoken to a legal friend of hers, and that friend would assist her in filing for divorce as soon as the baby is delivered. She had even attempted to persuade me to get pregnant in order for her to receive child support and alimony following the divorce, which would allow her to move in with our neighbor a few months later and lead a happy life. When I read that, I was appalled, and every time I think about that email, I still get sick to my stomach. Nevertheless, I soon forgot about my feelings and resumed my work. I snapped many images of the email on my phone, then closed it and placed it back where I had discovered it. My wife was trying to do something that sickened me more than the adultery. It was one thing to cheat, but it was really insane that she would try to con me into having a kid and then demand that I pay for it all so she could finance her ideal life with her poor partner. The icing on the cake was that I had no idea she was an actress at all because she was so talented. Her delight was almost unsettling, but I was so furious about everything that I made the extra effort to exact my retribution. I decided to go along with it, then surprise her with the bomb when she least expected it. I couldn't let her get away with it without experiencing the same level of hurt, betrayal, and aggravation that I had when I discovered her dishonesty. Call me crazy, but I had to do what needed to be done. So I pretended to be the ideal husband and father-to-be for the following 9 months. Knowing that she had been deceiving me for the entire time was difficult. However, it made me more determined to see this through the more she lied and seemed to be happy with me. I made sure she took all of her vitamins on schedule and went to all of her doctor's appointments. I was the most ideal husband a person could have. Finally, my wife went into labor a few days ago. Because it wouldn't apply to me, I was really anxious. But I ignored all of that and drove her alone to the hospital. I had previously contacted her parents, but not mine, as I didn't want them to be there in case things got too extreme. In any case, her parents had an hour-long drive to get to the hospital. We got some alone time, so I decided to tell her the truth at that point. I informed her that I would go outside and notify our neighbor so he could be here for her as soon as she was safely inside the room. There was no need for that, she said, looking surprised and stammering a little, and she didn't want a stranger in the room when she gave birth. I gave her a smile in return and showed her my fertility test results and the divorce paperwork because I had filed for divorce a few days prior to her due date. That day, I'd made sure to bring with me. She went over everything, appearing perplexed throughout. I told her that even if I had wanted to, I couldn't become pregnant with her. That infant was not mine then. After that, I informed her of the emails I had discovered on her extremely private account. It was then that she became fully aware of what was happening. She was having a hard time finding words when I left, and the look on her face was wonderful. When I eventually left the hospital and called our neighbor to let him know that my wife was in labor, I was afraid I would have to stay there too because of how quickly my heart was thumping. I hung up as soon as I could, not even waiting for his reply. After that, I got into my car and waited for the arrival of my wife's relatives. I sprinted out of there as soon as I heard her dad's car arrive into the driveway. I traveled for a bit before arriving at this motel a little outside of town, and I even switched off my phone just to be safe. In order to ensure that I would always be prepared, I had already packed my luggage a few weeks prior and had them safely stored in the trunk of my car. I did all I could to divert my thoughts for the remainder of the day, including drinking beer, watching television, and doing other things. Knowing that I was finally finished with this whole performance, I slept very soundly that night. I woke up the following morning and at last turned on my phone. Of course, my neighbor and wife sent me hundreds of texts, none of which I even bothered to read. However, I did read through a few texts I had received from my brother and dad. My wife must have called them when she was unable to get through to me. I made the decision to give my folks another call and talk to them. I informed them that I would be returning home shortly and requested that they bring my brother along so that I could fully explain the circumstances to them. For what was occurring did warrant an explanation after all. My brother was waiting for me when I arrived at my parents' house. They all appeared perplexed and a little irritated, which made sense given that they had just witnessed my own child's birth. They also missed their grandchild's birth as a result of it. However, I sat them down and told them the entire tale along with my motivations for my actions. They were stunned beyond words by the time I had finished telling them. I was prepared for a barrage of inquiries and charges, but none materialized. My dad said nothing more than that he hoped nothing worse would happen, and the others remained silent if they had anything else to say. So that was it, nothing to worry about. That was a few days ago, and although my family hasn't said anything, my wife has gone over and above to claim that I ruined her first-time mothering experience. Since I left, she's been attempting to contact me via phone and text, but I haven't returned any of her messages. A few hours ago, my neighbor even texted me to let me know that my wife was very angry and that we should put our differences aside in order to attempt to work things out with her. For once, I'm shocked by the boldness of these folks who are still attempting to engage with me and give the impression that I'm getting worked up over nothing. In his text, he also noted a few other things, such as how my wife's pregnancy had caused her to rediscover her love for me, which had come as a shock to them both. I ought to strive, at the very least, to salvage our marriage. I called BS on it, asking why my neighbor was still in the picture if she had fallen in love with me again. I have no idea why people find me to be so foolish. I am unable to address my wife's frustration. Her main point of contention is that, despite knowing everything from the start, I chose to stay with her and put up with this whole act, and said that I had deceived her by remaining with my wife during her pregnancy, even though I knew she was cheating on me with our neighbor, and that the baby wasn't mine. First update: since the baby's birth, over a week has passed, and I've been lodging in a hotel room. I haven't visited my wife yet, and I don't intend to do so either. I've made it very plain that I don't want to talk to her or listen to her, so I'm not sure why she keeps texting and phoning me. I haven't blocked her yet, but I have blocked my neighbor because he texted me to remind me that my wife was still hopeful and wished for me to contact her again. Since they are both essentially unemployed, I am positive that the only reason he is still with her and attempting to win my forgiveness is so that she will receive some money from the divorce settlement and alimony. I respected and valued my wife's decision to stay at home with the kids, but she wasn't content to simply do the housework. It was unacceptable for her to be unfaithful to me and to be cheating behind my back. Before anyone accuses me, let me clarify that I did not advocate for her to give up her career after getting married. She used to work, and back when we were dating, I was really supportive of her. She was the one who expressed her desire to step down and take care of our house. So I didn't oppose it either because it was her decision and I made a respectable living. Anyway, if we can establish that she had been unfaithful, which I hope would be simple, my lawyer should be able to free me from having to pay alimony. Even with all of their combined income, my neighbor and his wife will find it nearly hard to pay for my wife's costs, their own and a kid, because he is still having trouble finding well-paying modeling jobs. So I wish them well. All I can say is that I'm relieved to be out of this mess, and that I won't have to offer them anything, not even my time. All I can hope for is that my wife will see that and stop wasting my time by trying to get out of the divorce. I really hope she doesn't, but considering how brainless she is, she might as well. I'm ready for that too, therefore. I still have a backup copy of the photos of the emails that were sent on her private email account on my laptop, and they are securely stored on my phone. I'm not too concerned then. I know I'll be set even if she decides to cancel her account because she cannot remove the photographs I have. If everything else fails, I'll even give her the alimony. At least I won't have to spend time with her. Since the residence is registered in my name, she should consider herself fortunate that I'm allowing her to go on her own and that I've evicted her with force. For now, I'm holding out hope that this will pass quickly. Update 2. My wife opted to bargain since she wasn't satisfied with the settlement I had provided, which was essentially just the total amount she had spent during the marriage, proving that I was correct, and I thought that was quite generous as well. I don't really know what miracle she expects to occur, but whatever, well, good for her. She informed me via text yesterday that she had left the house. I returned with a joyful thought that she had most likely moved in with her parents or something today. But when I found out that she had recently moved into our neighbor's house across the street, I was really sad. And now I would still have to see her face every day, along with her boyfriend's. I even thought about moving back into a hotel, but I decided against it because this was my home, and I had the right to live anywhere I pleased. Just because they were going to make me uncomfortable didn't mean I was going to pack up and leave. Living with our neighbor was going to hurt our divorce case, and she was just making things worse for herself. So I did wonder why my wife hadn't moved in with her parents. However, I didn't have to consider long since, as I was going through all of the unseen messages I had received from various people up to that point, I came across one from my wife's father. His message had been buried in the shuffle of texts I hadn't replied to in the last several days from a number of people. He sent me a lengthy text in which he expressed his regret for what his daughter had done and made it clear that they highly disapproved of her behavior. I could feel the tears welling up inside of me, but I refrained from crying because it meant a lot to me that her father was saying these things. He expressed regret for my wife's actions and informed me that he would be cutting her off because she had informed him that she intended to fight the divorce. As of now, I couldn't find any logic in anything my wife was doing because I knew it would all eventually backfire. Even someone with her level of intelligence could have realized it, I'm sure. She either still has some wicked and bizarre tricks up her sleeve, or she's simply incredibly stupid. Though I wouldn't rule it out, I'm praying it's not the latter. She really is the worst. They'll try to make me feel uncomfortable or envious, and this living arrangement will undoubtedly cause some problems. However, I'm resolved not to allow them to irritate or offend me because they would undoubtedly turn that against me. Taking everything into account, not having to stay in a hotel still saves me a ton of money. The negotiations for my divorce settlement have been underway for a month now, and things are not going well for my wife thus far. I have the evidence to show that she cheated. Update 3. My wife is having a very difficult time with the divorce settlement talks, which started a month ago. I've managed to demonstrate that she had been unfaithful to me. She moved in with the guy I had accused her of cheating on me, which even made my job easier. Thus, there was no doubt as to the veracity of my statements. She attempted to fabricate some untrue charges that I was sterile because I was an alcoholic. And that's the reason she had an affair. I had grown incredibly resentful and harsh to her during our infertility journey. However, that was all easily refuted because everyone knew that I had given up alcohol when we decided to start trying for a child last year and hadn't touched any since. Once more, I have no idea why she believed it would work, and it was incredibly foolish of her. She was, after all, clinging to hope after her first plan went horribly wrong, and now she was too preoccupied with being a mother to be a cunning schemer. Her baby daddy was too dumb, and she was too busy, and so they were. We both know by this point that there is very little possibility that she will receive any alimony at all. And given that she was abruptly ejected from her boyfriend's home a few days prior along with her infant, I assume she told him this. Yes, you are correct. From their residence, I heard a lot of shouting and screaming. Then, a few minutes later, I heard her rapping on my door. She was crying as I opened the door, so I asked her what had happened. Playing the victim, she tried to tell me that he'd broken up with her because he didn't want the child and couldn't afford to be with a woman who would now have to raise a child. She looked really unhappy, so I invited her to come chat to me inside my home. In my life, I've heard a lot of breakups, but this one was particularly memorable. My spouse was pleading with me to return to our shared residence. To be honest, I would have been pleased for the baby to at least have a roof over its head, even though I detested her guts. Subsequently, she revealed that she had recently discovered that not only was our neighbor engaged, but she was also expecting a child. I was unable to speak. She then made an attempt to convince me that this was the reason he had kicked her out of his house and didn't want to be with her any longer. He was unable to spend time with my wife and their child since he had gotten his fiancée pregnant. I'm hardly a detective, but it didn't take me long to figure out that my wife had been lying all along, that she had most likely told him about my plan and given him all of the texts and emails I had preserved. I'm not sure if he had been aware of the original scheme and had only desired her for her cash, or if, after learning about her plan, he had truly fallen in love with her, but had afterwards decided to break things off. My wife was crying so hard now and begging me to take her back, so I ran out of time to think it through. I told her that I would not allow her to stay at my house in any way. However, she could reside at her parents' place once I dropped her and the baby off. I was going to leave her when she needed me the most, and that made her upset. However, I pointed out to her that I had only done everything for her and the baby up until now because I had mistakenly believed the kid to be mine. However, after discovering that she had been unfaithful and had misled me, I refused to put up with her foolishness. I went so far as to tell her that it was time to take care of her child like a mother and stop depending on other people. And when she dared to beg for money, I told her to obtain a job and laughed it off. She began to cry and yell once more, but eventually she left my house when I instructed her to. Since then, I haven't heard from her, and to be honest, I don't care about whatever drama she's concocting for herself. I'm sure she'll try to manipulate me during the divorce, but she's free to do so. My attorney is very skilled, and I have all the documentation I require to support my claims. I'm not concerned about it then. I'm simply relieved that she's no longer in my life, and that I can put this whole thing behind me. Regarding the infant, I don't give a damn whose it is. I have to live my own life, and it's no longer my problem. Consequently, I'm eager to move on and finally put this behind me.